Hi, glad to welcome you. Last time we organized the narrative content in our picture, and now we need to determine the compositional solution for this image. What problems do we need to solve? First of all, we need to decide what the black and white compositional scheme will look like. Since the perception of the image is largely influenced by the balance of the black and white, we very easily recognize objects in black and white photographs for the reason that the balance of black and white is the basis of our visual perception. In our compositional schemes, there will be only two colors, black and white, without any halftones. This simplification allows us to evaluate the overall balance of black and white, understand the spot distribution logic, and see the composition as a whole. Black and white, in this case, is the extreme schematic representation of tonal scale. In a full color picture, there will be many different colors and shades, but in a compositional scheme, we use black or white to indicate areas that are lighter or darker than a medium gray tone in the picture. The first question in working on composition is the amount of black and white. In a compositional scheme, there should be an unequal amount of black and white, so that it is clearly readable what is a figure and what is a background. Subconsciously, as the background is perceived color, what is present in a larger amount. The background contains figures and surrounds them. If amount of black and white is equal, this causes discomfort, since we do not understand what to pay attention to or what acts as a figure in a composition. We need to either make more of a black color, which will act as a background, and then the spots of the figures will be white. Or, on the contrary, we make the figures black inside a larger containing space of white background. Now we will see how this could look. Let's try to make two options. In one option, we will have more black, and in the other option, more white. First, let's try to make our figures white on black. So this is our background. We should always have more backgrounds. This is what contains the figures. In this version, we have white figures on a black background, and it looks good. However, this kind of lighting effect usually happens at night, when somewhere in the open space under a black sky you can see brightly lit figures. If our dancing event took place somewhere in a garden, then the solution with a black sky, black shadows, and brightly lit white figures would be logical. However, the action in our picture takes place in a ballroom. And this means that it would be logical to make the figures black and the background white. This solution makes it more like a scene in a brightly lit room. Mostly distant figures can be presented either as black or as white, but I think that here it would be correct to make these figures in the farthest background black. With this solution, all the background figures merge into one visual whole. This gave us a general solution. Next, we have to arrange all the rest of the composition's parameters. We decided that we will have more white, black figures on a white background. What is our composition meets the first condition of comfort? We must come up with another scheme, a larger one, to see more detail. There are exactly 3 more conditions of comfort left, so let's see what we can do with this composition to make it meet them all. The following step is to verify that the requirement of diversity of element sizes is met. We need the combination of big, medium, and small elements in our picture to avoid fragmentarity and monotony. In this case, we have big elements, foreground figures. There are also medium elements, background figures. There is a lack of small elements. We can invent some architectural details on the background as small elements. There will be several of them, so that none of them claims independence. And these details will set the desired scale of proportions in the image. Now everything is fine. What else should be there? Determining the focal point is necessary. The focal point for our composition, in fact, is already determined by the narrative scheme. It should coincide. When we tied two figures with a circular movement, we got that the space between these figures should be the place where all the tensions of the plot are concentrated. It is this space that should be the focal point in our compositional scheme too. Neither of the foreground figures can be the focal point by themselves, since they are equal in mass and are in a state of competition. The focal point here is the space between them, and it is also the space of tension between our characters, which contains the main intrigue. So, in this case, the focal point is the part of the background accentuated by the environment. It is very clearly highlighted because it is unique. There are no other similar elements in our composition. It remains to figure out how the situation is with the balance in our composition. As I have already said, there is internal balance and external balance. Internal balance is quite stable, even if all the elements are noticeably shifted to one side. External balance is much more important. External balance is related to elements that visually go beyond the picture plane to the left and right. If there are spots cut off by frame only from one side, if one side were fixed and the other hung on the air, it will give the impression of swaying. If there are spots cut off by frame both on the left and on the right, this kind of pins the composition to the frame, stabilizing it. Our composition has to be either totally in free flight without touching the left and right edges, or it has to be pinned from both sides to ensure the perceptual comfort. At this time, it has been pinned from both left and right sides. And now an additional question arises. How beneficial is it for us to have the foreground figures completely on their own? Maybe it makes sense to combine visually these figures with figures in the background so that they are not so independent. If they are less independent, this will give them the opportunity to act more as accentuating elements, as an environment. They will work specifically to support the allotted part of the background. It turns out that now all four conditions of comfort are met. First, we have an unequal amount of black and white. It is clearly visible what the figure is and what the enclosing background is. We have elements of all three sizes, large, small, and medium. 3. The composition is balanced. The horizontal balance between the spot touching the sides of the frame is achieved. We do not need to balance the composition vertically. It is stable anyway. 4, and we have a focal point. This is a allotted part of background. And only now, having these schemes, I can start working on sketches to establish more precise characteristics of depicted objects, position of figures, anatomy, costumes, facial expressions, and detailing. The composition sets only a rough scheme, but this rough scheme determines the viewer's perception of the entire work at first glance. That is, as soon as the viewer sees the pictures, he immediately, one and done, gets the road to follow. The gaze subconsciously comes to a certain place, exactly where the main semantic load is located. These are some guidelines to remember when working on composition. The good news is that basic decisions can be made using just little schematic sketches. It helps to prevent errors in large projects and saves a great deal of time and effort. I am pleased to announce that now on Amazon 2 of my books on artistic composition are available. The book Composition in Painting provides a new perspective on the topic of composition in visual arts. In fact, this theory of composition is a game changer. It's a very clear and logical system that's easily applied in practice. And there is also a book, Composition in Photography. The book is an attempt to explore how the rules of composition used in painting could be applied in photography. This is why the book is subtitled A New Approach. For those who are open to new ideas, there is a lot of interesting stuff. The links are in description below the video. Don't forget to subscribe, to give likes, and I'll be happy to read your comments. It's all for now. Have a good time. See you soon.